Hi everyone, today I'm going to be ranking all the horror books I've read in the last year for the Skull Ranking book tag. It is Halloween, the most wonderful day of the year, and oh god, I'm not wearing a costume. Let's fix that. Can you guess who I am? I'm an entitled cishet white guy. Oh wait, that's not very specific. I am the man in black from Westworld. I couldn't find my black gloves, so it's way too hot for that. The Skull Ranking book tag is a book tag created by Bree from the Lock Petition, the maker of Blackoweenathon. I did this last year. It was a lot of fun. I made a few modifications to where what I'm doing is I'm sort of ranking all the horror, thriller, mystery books I've read in the last year, and I sort of give them different scales. They're not ranked as far as how good they are, they're ranked as far as how I put them on the horror scale. This is very subjective, I think. I think it's also worth noting that when I talk about this listing, what is disturbing or ominous isn't necessarily trying to be horrifying. So take all this with a grain of salt. But I'm actually really excited to be doing this. I haven't read nearly as many books this year as last year, so hopefully it's more manageable than last year's 30-minute video, even with all these costume changes I'm planning. Spoilers. Without further ado, let's get going because this costume is hot. But the first one I want to be doing is the Gilda stories. Now, if you watched this last year, you might know that I actually read the Gilda stories last year and I reread it again in January. I have the similar feelings. I don't think it's trying to be horror. It might be ominous, but I put it low on the ominous scale. Like, it's not really meant to be like an Anne Rice type horror story. It's looking at it in a different vein, where the vampires are black queer women, and it's about, I think, humanizing them despite their being vampires, and just sort of using vampirism as a sort of a theme to being black and queer and a woman. So a good book, not necessarily the most horrific, but still, you know, a solid horror book. Next, we're going to say 11/22/63. It's one of those books that I read in the background if I'm busy. I'll just listen to it, and it's a fun read. I've read it like 5 or 6 times now, honestly. But is it horrifying? No. It's definitely ventures into disturbing. I think it can be scary. I think I would put it on the high end of disturbing. It depends on the scene. There's I think a wide range of themes explored, or the genres explored in this book. It's so big. Part of the reason I like it is because of that. It's not the most horrifying king at all, but it hits on a different emotional level. Next will be Dance Macabre, my bad, by Stephen King. This was one I read last November. I should have clarified this in the last year. It's going to be from the last time of this tag until today, so November to here. And this is technically about horror, history of horror in media and books. I was really disappointed because this book is very dated. It came out in the 80s, sure, but the themes and I guess things around horror, I don't think he did a very good job embodying it, and it's felt very much of its time, not necessarily in a problematic way, but just I don't think it does a good job of analyzing horror as a whole because it's so restricted to being that period of time. It can't really escape that perspective to give a more overarching idea of horror, and it was a really disappointing book. I can't say it was really scary at all. Maybe venturing to ominous, so a little higher than the rest because it technically is talking about horror, but didn't really know. Now, I just finished Wuthering Heights, and this is one that I think can go from ominous to disturbing. There were times where I was laughing because the characters were so fucking ridiculous. I don't know if it was supposed to be a comedy or not, but like, their characters can be pretty pathetic. Then there are moments that like shit gets really, even I'm thinking, Jesus, I don't like this person, but that's pretty dark. I'll put it, I think, on the low end of disturbing. Last year I didn't rank these. Like, I did the individual one, but I didn't split them up within that, so I'm going to try and do that this year. Let's see, the next we're going to do The Devil in Silver. This is a Lovecraftian book by Victor Laval. It is about a black man who gets arrested by the police for trumped up charges, and they don't want to process him, so instead they put him in a mental institution. And his time there would have been quite short, but he naturally is upset about being abused this way and about basically the racist system, and so he pushes back, and that causes his situation to escalate. It's very unsettling, the situations he's being put in. But more than that, we have a Lovecraftian side to it, where there seems to be this Lovecraftian monster involved here, the Devil in Silver being sort of the monster we're talking about. And there's a psychological side here. Is it psychological, or is this a literal Lovecraftian monster? And so I think it definitely gets disturbing, high end of disturbing, maybe low end of scary. I think I'm going to put scary just because the situation is quite terrifying. The thought that you could be trapped like this. I'm going to save the Shirley Jackson one, because I'm still reading it. Last Final Girl, a book that I read, I think a couple years ago actually already, so I reread it again. And I don't think that I found the story very scary, but you know, I'd like to think that the fact that it's so gory and so very much like a traditional horror movie, that it makes it somewhat disturbing, if not necessarily scary. So like, it's hard to fit this one in here because it doesn't quite fit disturbing, but I think it's more than just ominous. I feel like it's something you might get from watching maybe Evil Dead. I guess, yeah, that's a good one. Evil Dead is disturbing, it's ominous for sure, and it's not necessarily trying to be terrifying, although it can be pretty scary, to be honest. So I think that's a good placement, actually. Oh wait, I forgot. There's something else I meant to do. I'm Moira Rose of The Crows Have Eyes Too. So I'm not very good at that. And this is a very basic costume, but let's just, you know, embody the Moira Rose, please. If you could just pretend I could speak with that eccentric voice. David, continuing. Jamaica Inn was not very good. It was very, very boring. It was definitely ominous. I'll give you that. But Jesus, this book was just like so basic. I don't know, it's classic, I guess, but it's just girl moves in with her aunt who's in an abusive relationship, and the story progresses. He sells drugs and shit. It's really quite dull in my opinion. Next we have Rolling in the Deep. This is the prequel to Shauna McGuire or Mira Grant's Into the Drowning Deep about mermaids, and this one I thought did like really good job. Like, I'm trying to remember, they both start with a certain premise and we are trying to understand it. The second one, the main one, is based off of Rolling in the Deep. Rolling in the Deep, I can't remember whether or not what prompted the motivation to go to the sea and trying to find mermaids. Pretty sure it was actually just for a fake documentary like you have on the History Channel, something like that. And shit gets real. I thought like it did a pretty good job, I think, of being disturbing. Was it this? Oh, I don't know. For now, I'm going to put it there. What comes next? Falling in Love with Hominids. This is a short story collection that's, I think, more fantasy and sci-fi than it is strictly horror. I remember there were some horror ones in here, and I think I would give them ominous to disturbing, probably on the high end of ominous. It's been a while since I've read them. Next we have A Ghost Story by Peter Straub, and this here is one that I'm not sure I'm going to finish, but I came very close to finishing this year. I started reading it last year for a nighttime reading vlog to try to scare myself, and then I got bored with it and stopped. I tried picking it up again this year, and I did a whole night of recording new footage. Then I got back and I realized I had already deleted my old footage. I thought I was never going to return to it. So that was unfortunate. But what I will say is that when I'm out there, I think it helped that I was out by myself at night. It had helped me really get the sense of this ghost story. I thought the story itself was kind of boring, but there were scenes when he brought in the ghost aspect. It was really quite terrifying. I remember when I was out there by myself, I saw someone walking up, and it terrified me for a second. And I waited for them to get by. And after they had left, I realized I wasn't nearly as scared as I was before they got there. And it wasn't because they scared me. It was the isolation that allowed me to get inside my own head. And once I saw another person, they didn't necessarily scare me. They reminded me this is the real world. This shit doesn't actually happen. But honestly, it's one of the most horrifying. It can be one of the most horrifying in the right scenes. Even the stuff I don't think is that great. Next, let's do Alien Sex, which is more of a sci-fi anthology, but you know, I was sort of low on books here. I think it definitely gets into the low end of disturbing, mostly because it's just alien sex, not because it's necessarily disturbing on a horrific level. Just kind of weird. I think we need to change one more thing before we keep going. Okay, I'm Barb from Stranger Things. My costume doesn't really fit. I've gained a lot of weight over the last few years. If you could just not stare at my chest while I do this. I'm not changing. I'm keeping this in. Let's go. The Hole. The Hole was psychological. It was most certainly scary. And the question is, was it horrifying? The psychological side is about this man who gets paralyzed in an accident with his wife, car accident, and his mother-in-law starts to care for him. And Lord of Light, like the situation he gets in, I think it touches on abuse, but it also touches on like the isolation I mentioned before because of the situation he's in, the lack of control. But then there is this added depth to it, this weird thing that starts to happen, this hole, something that has to do with a hole starts to happen, and it's really unnerving. And honestly, oh God, was it horrifying? Yeah, actually I take it back. The psychological side, like it got to me. It was really good. It was really effective getting inside of his head. So like I think it was one of the best horror books I've read this year for sure. I think I put it in my favorites of the first quarter. Okay, I'm just gonna keep doing this. Next is a book that's not really horror, and I didn't put it on last year, but I kind of want to. Down in the Sticks and Bones is book 4 of the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. And this is about Jack and Jill, are two very different children from very stuck-up parents. And they come to this place, I think it's the Moors, where you have this sort of Frankenstein-esque mentor and you have a vampire mentor. And they get split among those. This is their experience in their world. And Wayward Children series, if you don't know somehow, is basically like Chronicles of Narnia, but every kid has their own world that's unique to them. And this one's unique to them as well, but even though that the two mentors they're facing are very different entities, it puts them in very different directions. I think it really gives us insight into their characters. The setting is, I think, very ominous. I can't say it necessarily gets disturbing, but she did such an amazing job embodying some classics here, and like it's hard not to recommend this, especially when it comes to horror, even if it's not itself strictly horror. It's more like dark fantasy. Now, Room was one that actually really got to me. This isolation, this entrapment of this young woman was terrifying. It was terrifying imagining this and experiencing this with her through the eyes of her child, nonetheless. So I'm going to put it on the high end of disturbing, actually. Final Girls by Riley Sager is a bad book. Not good. Don't read it. Unless you want to, but don't read it. It's bad. This was... blah blah blah. Was it scary? Fuck. It wasn't disturbing. I'll put on the very low end of scary. It's not scary, but like it does a decent job embodying a very stereotypical type thriller type movie. Actually, no, I take it back. It's not. I'm just gonna put it in the middle of the road because it's not disturbing or scary. Maybe I'll put it here. It's more than ominous, but I feel like I was more disturbed by Wuthering Heights, to be frank. Into the Drowning Deep. This was good. I don't think it was as scary as the first one, when I think about it. The first one wasn't as good as this one, honestly. This was a more cohesive book. This is the one we don't know the ending, but this is the first one is the one we do know the ending. So, oh Lord, I'll just put it in front of it. It's not worth all the stress. The Chalkman, I thought was really good. I would put it sort of middle of the road scary. Basically feels like a thriller version of It. Like, it did a really good job of that. So it definitely exceeds at being disturbing at times, and even, I think, a little scary at times, too. So I'm going to put it maybe in the middle of these two. Okay, I need to do something as my hand is hurting. Hello. You want a boo? It floats. You'll float too. You'll float too. And hello, I'm Georgie Porgy. Let's move on. We'll go to The Moon with Crusted Snow. This one was definitely disturbing. I really liked this book. I thought it did a really good job. One of the best I've read, I think. It really made me feel like I was in the midst of a apocalypse, of a dystopia, of a post-apocalyptic world where shit's hitting the fan and you better be ready to make it work. I think I would put it on the high end of disturbing, maybe even a light level of scary. There was some racial aspects that you could empathize in a way that I think felt quite terrifying, quite scary at times, at least for our characters. The Confessions of Franny Langston. This one, maybe it was very uncomfortable. I wouldn't necessarily say it's horror, because it's definitely more thriller. And even the thriller, it didn't feel heavy like to the traditional thriller aspects. There's a thrilling side of it, and there's definitely a disturbing side to it. I remember early on, I started thinking I don't like this book because I don't like what it's trying to do here. And then I realized it definitely, like, she knew what she was doing. She had a very deliberate purpose for the story she was telling. I think I would put it on the low end of disturbing. The things that we see our main character do is like, I feel uncomfortable with her in that situation, knowing that it can't end well. I think I'll put it before Final Girls, but after Alien Sex. Next is The Between. The Between I read this year. This October, actually, one of the first ones I read this month. It was phenomenal. I did not expect to love it this much. It was psychological. It's Hannah Reeve, and so this man, it's also sort of science fiction. This man who has a near-death experience, and he's convinced that he now is sort of moving through experiences in alternate versions of his world. Like, they think parallel worlds. Basically, he is stuck between these different worlds where things are slightly different. He makes slightly different choices, so he can never get things exactly right. But in every world, there is this white supremacist terrorist who is trying to kill him and his family, and there's an inkling that maybe it's connected to the fact that he can see other worlds he's not supposed to. And so the psychological side here, I think, was very disturbing easily, and maybe a little scary at times, the position he was in. So like, I think I put it just above The Moon of the Crusted Snow here. It was a very good, effective horror novel. Hannah Reeve knows what she's doing. Swordland, which is one that I think didn't stick very well because I didn't feel as good about this as I did the others. I would definitely put it disturbing. I think I'll probably put it More disturbing, The Last Final Girl. On an emotional level, it was more disturbing. Leave it at that. Ring Shout. No doubt that it's disturbing. It was never quite scary because it always felt like it was leaning more dark fantasy than strictly horror. I also didn't love the overall structure of it. I think it didn't help the audio narrator was horrible. The story itself, I felt like had room to be expanded. It felt like we had the traditional, this is good, this is bad. Good will defeat bad. And I know that's really simplistic. It's hard to figure too much the ultimate outcome. I don't know what I wanted different from this. And I think it didn't help that the narrator was bad and it sort of harmed my experience. It's certainly disturbing, at the very least, in the scenarios we're in and the things she has to go through, even if for me it's not explicitly scary. The Year of the Witching, I'll put it on the low end of disturbing at times, but The Year of the Witching was another one that I think was disappointing. I did not love how it handled religion. I did not love the acceptance themes around it. I wanted her to break bad. I wanted her to embrace the fuck you side of it, but it had a different direction to go with. And I think it was more tame because of that. I think it could have been a really disturbing and unsettling book, but it wasn't the direction she wanted to go, which is fair. I think I compared it too much to the movie The Witch. Okay, so I think what we have here is one more change. This might be the worst one yet, but let's see if you can guess it. At this point, all of them are just recycled, but if I could just get the hair right, it's like... Yeah, no, it's not, but you'll have to just accept it, okay? I am Shirley Jackson, the acclaimed horror writer. But just, you might hear me more puffy, but I just don't have the time or energy to worry about it. I can't see it without my glasses. Archive of the Forgotten, book 2 of this Library of Hell series. It's this more like the Book from Hell series. It's just not, I did not like it. And it's definitely dark fantasy, not a good way. I'll give it an ominous tone, like a little bit less than Donovan and Sticks and Stones. But Hard to Find to See, a NetGalley book I read this month by Joyce Carol Oates. And this is a set of novellas that have to do sort of crime thrillers. And I hate that I postponed it so long because it's actually really quite disturbing, I think. Like it gets pretty unsettling, the situations we're in with these people and these situations. They're pretty terrified. I would put it on the high end of disturbing, maybe even the low end of scary. In fact, I think I was a bit more scared in this situation than I was at the Moon of the Crust of Snow. Like, it really got me invested in the threat of our main characters, and in a very unsettling way. Like, it's definitely good gothic, ominous tone, solid throughout. Next is another sort of reaching one here is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And I know you might not think of this as a horror book, but it kind of is. I mean, this man gets visited by 3 dead ghosts, and the last one is always pictured to be very horrific in movies. He has to do this shit or else, and it's like, you might die. Like, it's really quite unsettling if you think about it. It ends happily, sure, but like, the main story can be quite scary. Is it scary? I feel like if I put it here, y'all would judge me, and like, you would take all my other ones with a grain of salt. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say I think it's more disturbing than Wuthering Heights. Maybe not quite as disturbing at parts as 11/22/63. Actually, since we're here, since I'm wearing Shirley Jackson in a very bad way, When Things Get Dark is another NetGalley arc. It's written by none other than Ellen Datlow. Not written, it's edited by Ellen Datlow. Same person who did the other anthology I was mentioning, Alien Sex, but this one was so good. I thought it did a phenomenal job embodying Shirley Jackson, based off what I've read, maybe half of her work at this point. On top of that, it felt like it flowed really well. There were some really top-notch stories in there, even if they didn't all hit as hard for me. So like, I would put it at the high end of disturbing, because Shirley Jackson's always disturbing. Was it ever scary? I don't think it was scary. I'm gonna put it on the high end of disturbing. Like, there was some unsettling parts. It was a really good anthology. If you're a fan of Shirley Jackson, I think it's definitely worth checking out. Next, let's do... I should have done Shirley Jackson when I was wearing Shirley Jackson. I apologize for not thinking this through. I'm improvising. Sure, let's do this one. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This one, certainly ominous, and I think pretty disturbing at times. I think I would put it here, more disturbing than those books, but less so than maybe Soraland or Room. Like, it was, the setting I think was very unnerving. The way the town will build up against them, I really felt that. That said, I think it's time for, I said one more, right? We have one more really before everything's done. So let's just, I'm Winifred Sanderson, and I put a spell on you. You know, you have to like this video, remember to subscribe. Can't say no to that, can ya? This quality content? I think so. Okie dokie pokey, Near the Bone. This was sort of a thriller horror book, and I think even though it was kind of cheesy, very like bare bones. It was like Stephen King level horror. I thought it was a fun book for sure. This was Christina Henry, solid book. Like it mixed a series of different types of horror movies. You have a monster flick, you have a isolation sort of survivalist flick, and you have a domestic side to it too that's very unsettling. So let's see. Certainly, whatever scary, I think, I'll be honest, like I don't know if I was like actively terrified for sure, but there were definitely moments where I was like, oh my god, what's happening to our character? Anyway, I listened to this like over the course of like one afternoon because I couldn't stop listening. I was so enticed. I think I'll put it on the light end of scary. So what comes next? Survive the Night, a horrible book. I think there were parts that were definitely more unsettling than Riley Sager's. Like, come on, do you ever read a Riley Sager book and think, oh, my main character might be in trouble, like she might actually die? No, come on. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I've only read a few of his books. He only has like 5 or 6, so like half. But I'd love to be proven wrong that he can actually do something serious and not just be generic enough to like play it safe every single time. But still, like I was mildly invested in our character. I think I would put it more threat than here. Like I believe the threat in 11/22/63, which is why I'm going to put it here. Which I think is actually a very generous gift to Riley Sager. You're welcome to Riley Sager. Stamp of approval from Josh, I guess. Final Girl support group. Far superior to this stupid book that is Final Girls. Fun, very engaging. I think I'll put it again, more invested than the last one, but fuck me. I'm gonna keep it here. Yeah, play it safe. Safe photo. I think it is terrifying. It's this like 11/22/63 is one that I just listened to in the background of course like 2 years. So saying I read it this year is kind of a stretch. But I finished it this month even. Definitely horrifying. I think it's more consistently horrifying than Ghost Story. Like Ghost Story has some real drag to it. I think it keeps its tone throughout in a very terrifying way. And next we have, you can't see this cover very well, but it is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This one definitely was disturbing. It wasn't as effective as I'd hoped. I think part of it is the mystery, and if you know the setting, if you know what the premise is, which it's hard not to, it's such an old book, but if you know that, I think it's hard, it takes away from it. It's like after you see the Babadook in the Babadook, it's not quite as scary as it used to be. But at the same time, I think I'll put it just above Shelley Jackson's How We've Always Lived in the Castle. Stick by my answer. Oh my god, well, one more. And I'm going to say for now, I think I made it right halfway through this book. I need to finish it today. And I'm not sure what I think, but I'll give it ominous for sure, but right now I don't quite see what the thread is. Right now it just feels like a domestic life with very subtle, unsettling aspects to it, what really just highlights this weird, sort of two-faced side of people, sort of like her memoirs did. But I'm not seeing anything that really goes beyond that. So actually I think I'm going to put it here above The Archive of Forgotten and below Down Among the Sticks and Bones. If I finish it today, which hopefully I will come back and I will update you if my feelings are different. Otherwise, just assume that those are my thoughts to the entire book. Otherwise, I think we're done. Like, this was a magical experience. One where you get to see just how much I've evolved when it comes to how well my costumes fit and how lazy I've gotten and what I'm willing to tolerate. At the very least, I've gotten the most out of this costume. It cost me like $70 like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even 4. I'm not expected to last, but I enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed it. This year has some decent horror readings actually, even if I didn't read quite as much on the whole. But I read this books this last year, so that's also understandable. If you made it to the end, why don't you give me a skull in the comments, of course. And remember, check out Bree's channel if you haven't somehow. And as always, have a great day, stay safe, and I will see you in Nonfiction November. I put a spell on you, and now I'm gone.